there are certain phrases that ripple through the soul like a forgotten melody remembered. Phrases that do not merely suggest something beyond, but awaken the hidden architecture of what is already within. The new heaven and earth is one such utterance. It is not a sentence to be read, but a veil to be parted. It resounds not in the ears, but in the marrow, beckoning those who feel the restlessness of this world and sense, without knowing how, that something else awaits behind the illusion. To speak of a new heaven and earth is not to conjure some distant utopia or celestial afterlife reserved for the devout or the worthy. It is to awaken to the tremor of a deeper truth hidden beneath the ordinary rhythm of days. It is a call to vision, to perceive not with the eyes alone, but with the heart, an organ of knowing far older than logic and far more precise than proof. In this context, new is not temporal but ontological. It is not a replacement, but a revelation, the emergence of what was always there, buried beneath the noise and clutter of time's passing dream. We begin this exploration not with the assumption of knowledge, but with reverent unknowing. In this vast cosmological theater, where galaxies turn like slow-burning lanterns and time folds in upon itself like paper in a child's hand, we ask, what is it that truly changes when heaven and earth are made new? Is it the world that shifts, or is it the seer? Is it the structure of reality that reforms, or the eyes with which we behold it? Imagine a forest where every tree hums with the memory of stars, where leaves whisper truths in a language too ancient for words. Picture a sky that does not end in blue, but opens like a door. This is not fantasy. This is perception unshackled, heaven and earth, no longer separated by dogma or distance, but reunited in the heart of the beholder. The new is not summoned from afar, but unveiled from within. And so we are not waiting for a miracle to arrive, but learning how to see the miracle that never left. To unravel this mystery is to disassemble the scaffolding we have built around meaning. It is to question the definitions we inherited and the borders we drew between sacred and profane, divine and human, spirit and flesh. The old heaven was a place above, distant and abstract. The old earth was matter, dense, flawed, and temporal. But what if the separation itself was the illusion? What if the true alchemy is not one of destruction and renewal, but of convergence? What if the new heaven and new earth are not two places, but one unified revelation, a fusion of realms where the infinite and the intimate intertwine? We live in a time of fragmentation. The noise of 1,000 ideologies drowns out the still voice within. Every day, we are fed with images of collapse, division, and decay. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent unraveling is another story, quieter, but more enduring. Like threads of light woven into the darkest fabric, signs of the new are already emerging. Acts of radical kindness in a brutal world, unexplainable synchronicities that rewrite the rules of time, awakenings that shatter the old self like glass. These are not coincidences. They are the tremors of a greater shift. They are birth pangs. The phrase new heaven and new earth originates in the ancient texts, yes, but it belongs not to theology alone. It belongs to every soul that has stood at the edge of despair and chosen to believe there is more. It belongs to mystics and misfits, to visionaries and wanderers, to all those who have felt in the silence of night that something immense is drawing near, not descending from above, but rising from within. It is not so much a prophecy as it is a mirror. When we are made new, so too is the world. And yet, this mystery resists definition. It is not a doctrine, but a living metaphor, a multi-layered symbol that speaks differently to each who encounters it. For some, it is the end of suffering and the rebirth of justice. For others, it is the spiritual union of heaven's clarity and earth's rawness. For still others, it is the completion of a cycle, the turning of a cosmic page. All of these are true, and none of them contain it fully. It is like light refracted through a prism, one source, many colors, each necessary to understand the whole. So, what is our task in this exploration? Not to prove or to argue, but to listen, to allow these symbols to speak through us, as a river speaks through the stones it shapes. We do not build the new heaven and earth. We remember it. We do not ascend to it. We awaken into it. The path forward is not upward or outward, but inward. And in this sacred movement inward, everything external begins to transform. This is the secret. That transformation of perception is the most radical form of creation. In the pages to come, we will journey through the heart of this mystery. We will trace its core themes and spiritual geometry, enter its symbolic language, explore its implications in our modern lives, and ultimately arrive at the threshold of transformation. But before we proceed, let us be still for a moment and ask ourselves, not just intellectually but viscerally, what would it mean to live in a new heaven and earth? What would change if we believed, truly, that the divine and the material were never separate? What would we become? And now, with this question vibrating in the marrow of our being, we step into the next stage of the journey. To truly step into the mystery of the new heaven and earth is to surrender the impulse to master it. We are not here to define it into a corner or box it in theological terminology. We are here to feel it, to resonate with it, to breathe it in like mountain air after a long exile. And so, rather than approach this realm as scholars might a map, we must let it approach us like a sunrise cresting over the edge of forgotten land. The core themes that pulse at the center of this cosmic unveiling are not rigid doctrines, but living, breathing truths, archetypal patterns that repeat through myth, soul, and starlight. The first and perhaps most profound of these is the collapse of duality. We have inherited a worldview of opposition: heaven versus earth, spirit versus body, light versus dark, sacred versus mundane. But in the language of the new heaven and earth, these binaries dissolve. It is not that the light triumphs over darkness, but that the darkness is transfigured by the light within it. It is not that earth ascends into heaven, but that heaven descends and marries the dust. The sacred becomes sensual. The divine becomes embodied. No longer does spirit float above the world as an aloof observer. It incarnates, it roots, it touches. This theme is not new. It has echoed in the songs of ancient mystics, in the poetry of prophets, and in the dreams of seekers from every tradition. But now, in this age of planetary upheaval and existential vertigo, it emerges with a new urgency. The veils are thinning, the old walls are crumbling, the age of separation is dying, and with its death comes the birth of something luminous. The new heaven and earth is not just a destination, it is a perception, a frequency, a state of alignment where everything begins to speak again. In this new alignment, time bends. Another core principle surfaces: the return of the eternal now. We have lived enslaved to linearity, obsessed with beginnings and endings, with future salvations and past regrets. But the new heaven and earth pulses in a different rhythm. It is circular, spiral, holographic. It reveals that eternity is not a place we go when life ends, but a dimension we access when the ego loosens its grip. In this realm, the past and future become mirrors, each reflecting the sacredness of this single breath, this single heartbeat. The illusion of distance dissolves, not only spatially but spiritually. The divine is no longer deferred, it is here, and so too is the self redefined. Under the old paradigm, identity was a mask worn to survive the theater of separation, a carefully constructed persona navigating systems of fear and fragmentation. But in the light of the new heaven and earth, identity becomes translucent. We no longer see ourselves as isolated egos navigating a cold universe, but as luminous expressions of the same divine thread woven through all being. You are not a solitary drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean remembering itself as a drop. And that recognition is not poetry alone. It is liberation. This is where another theme rises to the surface: the power of remembrance. The new heaven and earth is not a reward granted from on high. It is an unveiling of what has always been hidden in plain sight, obscured by the fog of conditioning. Like waking from a dream, this process is not about becoming something new, but about remembering what was forgotten. Every child knows the taste of the eternal before the world teaches them to forget. Every heart holds the original blueprint before it was covered in noise and scar tissue. The invitation, then, is not to strive, but to recall, to remember in the deepest sense of the word, to stitch back together the pieces of truth scattered across lifetimes. And woven through all these themes is the sacred language of unity. Unity not as uniformity, but as wholeness. The new heaven and earth does not require that we become the same. It reveals how our infinite diversity is the expression of a singular cosmic intelligence. The flower and the flame, the song and the silence, the weeping and the wonder, each is a facet of the same jewel. In this new way of seeing, the ordinary becomes illuminated. A meal becomes a ritual. A conversation becomes communion. The ground beneath your feet becomes holy, not because it is rare, but because you have remembered how to see it. These core concepts are not reserved for mystics or prophets. They are etched into the grain of reality itself. They are truths we've always known but forgot how to name. They are the architecture of a world just beginning to show its true face. And as we peer into this emerging vision, we must recognize one more principle. Transformation is not an act of will, but of surrender. The new heaven and earth does not demand that we force our way in. It simply asks that we stop clinging to the old. Like a river removing a dam, the flow will carry us if we let it. Like a seed cracking in the dark, life will emerge if we allow it to break us open. And so the stage is set. The themes have stirred the soil. The veil is thinner now, and the echo of something vast draws near. Every sacred truth that has ever reshaped the soul was first whispered in the language of symbol. The cosmos itself speaks this way, through signs, shadows, stories that carry meaning deeper than fact, deeper than doctrine. When we turn toward the mystery of the new heaven and earth, it is not the literal soil and sky we study, but the sacred tales echoing beneath them. Allegory, myth, and vision become our compass. These stories are not fictions. They are maps drawn in dream ink, revealing what logic cannot hold. Let us begin with a vision. A vast, cracked wasteland under a dying sun. This is the earth, as seen through eyes bound by fear, scarred by war, polluted by greed, abandoned by meaning. In the center of this desolation walks a solitary figure cloaked in rags. Their name is Remembrance, and they carry nothing but a shattered mirror. Each shard reflects a different world, one golden and lush, another dark and buried, another radiant and rising. This wanderer walks not to escape the wasteland, but to awaken it. With each step, they kneel, pressing a shard of the mirror into the broken soil. And from that union, reflection meeting earth, a flower blooms. The color of the flower is not seen by the eye, but felt in the soul. The story teaches us that heaven is not imposed from above but blooms wherever truth is returned to the ground. This is the first great symbol, the mirror. Not as a surface for vanity, but as a portal of remembrance. In the age of the new heaven and earth, mirrors are no longer used to admire illusions, but to shatter them. The mirror reminds us that every soul holds a fragment of the greater design. And only when we bring our piece to the collective soil does the full pattern emerge. This is not uniformity, but sacred interdependence. Each of us carries a sliver of the infinite, and only together do we become whole. Now, enter the tale of the two trees. In the heart of a living forest, untouched by man, grow two ancient trees. One bears fruit that grants knowledge, the other fruit that grants vision. The tree of knowledge speaks in binaries. It divides, categorizes, explains. The tree of vision, however, speaks in wholeness. It does not say this or that, but this through that. The old world was built beneath the tree of knowledge. It gave us systems and names, but it also gave us division. The new heaven and earth arises when we return to the tree of vision, not to forsake knowledge, but to heal it, when intellect and insight become allies, not enemies. This sacred forest, then, is not a physical place, but a terrain of consciousness. We have all lived for centuries beneath the first tree. Now, the invitation is to walk deeper, to sit beneath the second, and to see not what things are, but what they mean. The tree of vision reveals that opposites are not enemies, but complements, that death is not an end, but a doorway, that the cracks in the world are not flaws, but fractures through which the divine light returns. From the forest, we follow the wind into the third narrative, the river that remembers. This river flows backward, not against nature, but against forgetting. Those who drink from it do not become younger, but more ancient. They remember who they were before they were born. They recall a truth etched in the soul before language arrived. The water does not show them the future. It returns them to the blueprint. They wake with tears not of sorrow, but of recognition. "I knew this once," they whisper. "I knew this before the world told me to forget." In the world of the new heaven and earth, such rivers are not rare. They run quietly beneath every moment of clarity, every dream that echoes beyond time. We each have access to this river. It flows beneath our silence, beneath the stillness between two heartbeats, beneath the moment when wonder overrides fear. It flows through the quiet gaze of a child, through the soft unraveling of ego in grief, through the joy that bursts from no source at all. This river is memory not of events, but of being, of essence. The more we drink, the more we dissolve into something truer than name or form. And from that dissolution, something eternal begins to rise. Lastly, let us journey to the horizon that moves. In the world as it was, the horizon marked the end, the place we could not reach, the limit of the visible. But in this new world, the horizon does not retreat. It moves as we move. It draws near as we awaken. It is not a border, but an invitation. And those who walk toward it find that the sky bends downward to kiss the earth. The stars do not burn above, they hum beneath our feet. And we begin to understand. Heaven was never up, and earth was never below. They were always meant to meet in the center, within us. This symbolic world is not escapism. It is a deeper realism. These tales are the ancient architecture of soul knowledge, stories carved into the DNA of consciousness itself. And now they are stirring again, not to entertain, but to awaken. These symbols invite us to remember that we live not in a fallen world waiting for rescue, but in a sleeping one waiting for remembrance. And as we awaken, we do not just witness the new heaven and earth, we become its voice, its hands, its breath. So, as these symbols settle into the soil of your awareness, each seed humming with its own ancient truth, pause and feel what stirs in your inner sky. These are not just stories. They are frequencies. They are keys. If the new heaven and earth is more than a celestial metaphor, if it is a living architecture vibrating just beneath the membrane of our daily existence, then the question becomes not whether it is real, but how it is revealed. The symbolic becomes the practical, not when we understand it intellectually, but when we live it. For in truth, this sacred unfolding does not arrive with grand proclamations or planetary reordering. It enters quietly, through the doorways of our smallest choices, through the frequency of presence we bring to even the most mundane of tasks. To integrate the new heaven and earth is not to ascend from this world, but to root more deeply into it, with new eyes, new breath, new recognition. It means allowing the veil to thin not just in meditation, but in traffic, in meetings, in the grief of loss, in the ecstasy of laughter. The first real-world implication, then, is attentiveness. We must become radical observers, not just of the outer world, but of the inner symphony playing beneath each moment. This attentiveness is not hypervigilance, but reverence. It is the art of slowing down enough to feel the pulse of the sacred in every gesture. In practical terms, this may appear as an inner shift so subtle the world might not notice. You pause before speaking and ask, "Am I reacting from separation or responding from union?" You listen not just to the words of another, but to the ache beneath them, the silent longing for connection. You begin to sense that every encounter is an altar. And when you walk into a room, you no longer ask, "What can I get?" but "What can awaken here through me?" These are not grand spiritual acts, but micro-resurrections, the birth of the new earth through the vessel of human choice. This shift also reconfigures how we perceive systems. In the old paradigm, we worked within structures that demanded fragmentation, work separated from spirit, home separated from purpose, leadership separated from empathy. But in the world that is being born, integration is not optional. It is inevitable. The economy of the new earth is not driven by extraction, but by reciprocity. Education becomes not about the accumulation of information, but the awakening of inner knowing. Health is no longer a war on disease, but a return to wholeness. Technology becomes not an escape, but a mirror, amplifying either our disconnection or our unity, depending on our consciousness. In the old world, many sought to fix the world as one might repair a broken machine. But in the new, healing does not come from control. It comes from coherence. A forest does not force its harmony. It simply exists in resonance. In the same way, when a human being begins to embody coherence, when thought, word, and action align with truth, then that person becomes a resonant field. Change radiates outward from them, like ripples from a stone cast into still water. It is not dramatic, but it is irresistible. This does not mean we withdraw from activism, justice, or reform. On the contrary, it means we engage from a new center, not as warriors fighting the dark, but as beacons illuminating the forgotten. You may still protest, still resist injustice, still vote and build and speak, but you do so not from fear of what is falling apart, but from love for what is rising. This love becomes your compass, not a sentimental love, but a fierce, grounded love that says, "I remember the truth of this world, and I will not abandon it." Relationships, too, become crucibles of transformation. Where once they served survival, transaction, or escape, now they become sacred laboratories, places where heaven and earth wrestle and kiss through the fire of vulnerability. You begin to see your partner, your friend, your child not as separate entities, but as reflections of yourself, calling you deeper into presence. Conflict becomes invitation. Wounding becomes portal. Love becomes not possession, but mutual awakening. Even language shifts in this new frequency. Words are no longer tools of control or division. They become vessels for presence. Silence is no longer uncomfortable but sacred. The quality of your voice matters as much as the content. You begin to understand that your words either reinforce the illusion of separation or speak the world back into unity. Every phrase becomes an act of creation, and so you speak with care, as one sculpting light into form. As these principles root into daily life, something miraculous begins to happen. The world responds. Not always immediately, not always in visible ways, but as your inner frequency shifts, you begin to live in a different reality. Synchronicities increase. The right people appear. Obstacles soften. Even in the midst of chaos, you feel an unseen hand at your back. This is not magical thinking. It is the law of resonance. The new heaven and earth is not a reward for the pious. It is the natural outcome of attunement. As you tune to the sacred reveals itself through all things. And then comes the remembering. You are not separate from the new earth. You are it. Every healed belief, every moment of aligned action, every choice made in love, that is the world reborn. It happens not in one grand moment, but in 10,000 quiet ones. So walk not with haste, but with wonder. Let your steps become prayers. Let your routines become rituals. Let your presence become prophecy. For the new heaven and earth is not waiting at the end of time. It is arriving now, through you. And so we arrive at the threshold. Not a final page, but a portal. The new heaven and earth is not an ending to be understood, but a beginning to be embodied. We have journeyed through symbols, stories, patterns, and practicalities. We have peered through the veil of what once seemed ordinary and glimpsed something vast and holy shimmering behind it all. Now, the question is no longer, what is the new heaven and earth? The question is, how deeply are you willing to let it live through you? This mystery is not static. It is not a finished prophecy etched in cosmic stone. It is a living transmission that evolves with your breath, your choices, your gaze. You are not here as a passive witness to this new reality. You are the instrument through which it sings. Every cell in your being is wired to carry the frequency of a world reborn. And the moment you say yes to it, not with words alone, but with presence, humility, courage, that moment becomes a hinge in time, a sacred turning. The beauty of this mystery is that it does not require perfection. It does not demand that you become a saint or renounce your humanness. It asks only that you become real. It asks that you soften your defenses and listen to the whisper in the silence, to the ache behind your longings, to the soul of the world breathing through the wind, the water, the firelight. It asks that you remember what it felt like to trust, to wonder, to be moved by something greater than fear. This is not the transformation of escape, it is the transformation of return. To return not to the past, but to the original knowing that existed before the world told you who to be. The new heaven and earth lives there, behind the noise, behind the names, behind the guarded eyes and the tired smiles. It is the place where the sacred and the simple are no longer separate, where your laughter heals others, where your tears irrigate the dry places of the world, where your stillness echoes louder than your words. We live in a world that is dying and being born all at once. Systems built on separation are cracking, certainties are collapsing. But underneath this disintegration, something ancient is awakening. You may not see it on the news. You may not hear it in the loudest voices, but it is here, in the quiet revolutions of the heart, in the reuniting of heaven and earth, not as distant realms, but as interwoven dimensions of now. You are part of that awakening, not an observer, but an axis, not a spectator, but a spark. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too small. The sacred does not require you to be ready. It asks only that you be willing. Willing to see with new eyes. Willing to let go of what no longer serves. Willing to fall in love again with the mystery of being alive. If you can offer that, if you can offer your trembling yes, then the new heaven and earth will rise to meet you in ways you cannot imagine. Not all at once, not with lightning, but with grace, with rhythm, with the quiet insistence of something eternal moving through your finite hands. And if you forget, as you will, as we all do, then begin again. That is the final truth of this path. The new heaven and earth does not vanish when we fall asleep. It waits, patient and undiminished, for the next breath, the next awakening, the next choice to love again. Like the sun rising after a long winter, it does not punish us for forgetting. It simply shines. So here is the call, not from a mountaintop, but from within your own chest. Let the old collapse. Let the new be born through you. Let your body become a sanctuary. Let your thoughts become prayers. Let your life become the meeting point between what was always here and what the world forgot. You are the bridge. You are the threshold. You are the space where heaven touches earth and says, yes, let there be light again. And so we end where we began, with a mystery, now not just glimpsed, but entered. The veil is thin. The invitation is real. The time is now. The new heaven and earth is not a place. It is a presence. It is you, awakened.